Okay, so just plotting coordinates. Just remember your basic foundation is that quadrant 1 is where you move right and up. Quadrant 2 is when you move left and up. Quadrant 3 is moving left and down. And quadrant 4 is moving right and down. And then if you ever see a 0, that means it's on one of the axes. Okay, so I'm going to leave you to plotting those 6 coordinates, and then we'll check to see if we match. Okay, so on your plotting, I would expect you to label them like that with the letter beside them so I can see which letter is what. So method 1 of graphing that we learned was called the table of values. So that means to draw a T-chart. I probably wouldn't give you that on the test, so you should know as soon as you see table to draw a table. And on this one, you can do anything you want with X. Okay, so you can make X. So I'm going to make X 0 because that's easy usually. So then I would say, well, I have to figure out Y. So Y equals 3 times 0 minus 6. And then you can just make anything else for X. So I'm going to pick something negative. So I'm going to go negative 3. Y equals 3 times negative 3 minus 6. So that'd be negative 15, which probably wasn't a very good pick by myself because now that's not really on my graph, but that's okay. Let's go 1. 3 times 1, subtract 6. I'm going to go, I don't know, let's go 3. 3 times 3 minus 6. 9 minus 6, which is 3. Okay, so I need you to plot these coordinates. So for instance, this first one would be the coordinate 0, negative 6. Okay, and then plot them and we'll see what happens. Okay, so 0, negative 6, 1, comma, negative 3, and 3, comma, 3. Obviously that other one I picked doesn't really work with this. So when you plot these points, just remember that they should line up. And then you connect. On your test, I will be looking for you to put arrows on your line because I'm showing you that it just keeps going and going and going. Then we had what we call the intercept method. Please don't mistake this for the slope intercept method. That's something different. This is just intercepts. So I want the intercepts. So I'm going to want the x-intercept and I'm going to want the y-intercept. That's what the process is. So to get an x-intercept, we would make the y 0. And to get a y-intercept, we would make the x 0. So that's the idea. So in the first round here, if my y is 0, basically I can cover it up or scratch it off. So divide by 6. So the x-intercept is 3. And just in case you're ever dealing with intercepts, what is the actual coordinate? It's not just 3. 3 isn't a coordinate. A coordinate would be 3, 0. That would be the coordinate of the point. Okay, so then if we do the x as a 0, then I'm just going to forget about that. And then I get 2. So on the y-axis, you're going to hit it at 2. And if I actually wanted to deal with the coordinate, I would name it 0, 2. So there's my graph. Connect the 2 points. Okay, number 4. Find the slope, the midpoint, and the distance. So you have 3 formulas, and you would have those formulas with you on the test. I will give you a sheet with those on there. Okay, so slope. You don't need to write this down if you have your formulas in front of you, but I don't, so I'm going to write them on my sheet. So there's the slope formula, and you know what I'm going to do before I start? I'm going to label my coordinates. So I'm going to go, this is x1, y1, and I'm going to make this x2, y2. So I get -1 subtract -7, 3 subtract -5. Okay, so this subtract and then a negative number, I'm going to think that actually adds it. So -1 plus 7, 6. And I would add it, 8. So it would go up 6, right 8. That would be the slope. And if somebody wrote me this as an answer, that's good too. That's a slope as well. If you left it like that, you're good. If you moved it to that, you're also good. Doesn't matter to me. Okay, midpoint. So the midpoint, you would average the x's. So how do you find an average? You add, divide. Average x, average y. If you are a person who's already jumping to your calculator, if you are typing this in, do you understand that you would either have to do this in brackets or you would have to do this equals and then divide by 2? Okay, so somebody who types this straight into their calculator will get it wrong. You would either have to do this or equals divide. Okay, I'm going to do it in my head. That makes -2. So -1. -7 minus 1 is -8. -4. Okay, and then we had the distance. Okay, so formula sheet would have your formula for it. Whoops, no, I did this wrong. These have minus signs in them, I believe. Okay, so this is the formula. And you know what I'm going to do? Nope, I did this wrong again. What does your formula say? X, somebody looking at it? Probably do it like that, don't I? Does anybody have their formula sheet? Am I good now?
Yeah, you do.
Okay, formula sheet, this is what it would look like. And you know what I'm going to do? X2 minus X1, guess what? Boom, I already did that. So you know what I'm going to do? Just 8. And then y2 minus y1, well, I already did that as well. So I'm going to replace that with a 6. Okay, then your calculator, you'd be doing 8 squared plus 6 squared, and then square root of that is 10. So on your test, a couple things to think about. If that doesn't square root perfectly, this one did. If yours doesn't, just go to 2 decimal places. And if you ever have, let's pretend this was a negative 6. Okay, it was a 6, but let's just pretend it was a negative 6. Do you understand that that's still positive 36? So that's what you're doing. Okay, somebody who would do this as a calculator maneuver or a thought, this is wrong. Positive 36. This one would be negative, and we don't want that. Just think about distances. You can never have negative distance stuff. Okay, so it's not what we want. We always want positives in our distance. Okay, graphing lines. So a bunch of random graphs I'm going to give you. You got to figure out which style you want. So on this first one, I'm going to be thinking about y equals mx plus b as my method. So if I'm looking on my formula sheet, I think, oh, I want to use that. So what is the slope? What is the y-intercept? Those are your 2 questions. What is the slope? What is the y-intercept? That's what you always got to think about. So the slope, can you write it as a fraction? So I'm going to put it as down 2, right 1. And what is your value for your y-intercept? 0, right? It's not even there. So if I go y-intercept of 0, I'm going to go down to right 1. Number 2, you would think about the formula you're looking at, and the formula I'm looking at again would connect to the y equals mx plus b. So the b is -3. So you would start at -3 on the y-axis. So don't forget that is a y-intercept. It's always a y. And you're going to have to go up 2 and right 5. Okay, the next one. You should have a red flag flashing. This is something what? It's special. It's just a special line. That's what you should think. Because there's not 2 variables in it. So it's special. So what do I know about special? I have 2 options. Should I make it horizontal or vertical? Those are the 2 options. And if you forget, draw a point that has a y value of -1. Draw another point that has a y value of -1. So it ended up being horizontal. Okay, next graph. Oh, it looks like a y equals mx plus b. That's what it looks like. So my b, I can identify quickly. That is 4. My slope. What is the slope of this one? This one's a little bit trickier to look at. 1. And then 1 over 1 as a fraction, yep. So 1x, right? So slope 1, so you are going to have to go up 1, right 1. So it's kind of the most basic staircase you could make, right? Just up by steps. Okay, so on the next one, this is not y equals mx plus b. So this is the general form one. It looks like this. So I would say, okay, that looks like that one on my formula sheet. So what do I do with this style? So I gave you 2 options. You could do option 1, just algebra it. Get y alone. Option 2 is that I give you formulas on your formula sheet. So those are the formula sheet options, and I'm going to do algebra. So in my algebra, I keep the y stuff, I moved the x stuff, and I moved the number. So you should get the same findings though. We should get a 7 over 2, and we should get a 5. That looks okay? We're matching people? So there's my y-intercept of 5. Oh boy, if I go up 7 and right 2, I'm like way off the map here. If I'm up 7 and right 2, I'm in this zone. Can anybody give me a different option so that I can do the same thing? I could just go down 7 and left 2. Does that make sense? Do you still think it would line up with that point up there? Yeah, look at that. It would still cut through there. Okay, the last one looks different again. So this is on your formula sheet, recognize point slope. So it would be rise. So this is what I'm looking at on my formula sheet. I'm like, okay, that's what it looks like. So I'm going to need a point and the slope. So what is the coordinate of the point? And remember what the formula does? When there's a minus inside a formula, what does it do? Opposite stuff. Whenever you see a negative in a formula, it's going to work with the opposites. So I need a, did you write -3? And +1 as a coordinate. And then the slope is going to go down 4, right 5. Okay, so this one is when you graph a point, and your point is now anywhere. Doesn't have to be on an axis, it's just a point. So here's my point, and then there's my move. Okay, so you can see what I'm doing. If you are a person who really wants to check your answers, how could I do that? Here's a way. I can take this coordinate, which would be 2, -3, and I could plug it into this. So if I did -4, 2 + 3 equals 5, -1 - 1. If I plug that in, that equation should be equal. So does this equation equal each other? So this is 5 times -4. So that came out to -20. And this is 5 times -4. So look at that. Our coordinate worked in that equation. So that's a check. Okay, writing equations. So the first one, I give you a slope and a y-intercept. So if you were to write me an equation, you would be picking y equals mx plus b. Y equals mx plus b. So that's all I want for that one. This one has a slope of that and a point. This one has a point. So I'm going to use the bracket one, point slope. There's the x variable, there's the y variable. Okay, so slope 3 and 7 go in the front multipliers. And then when I plug in, I always got to think opposite, right? Opposite, opposite. So plus 9 and a subtract 4. Okay, write your answer in general form. And we're going to do this for both. Okay, so how do we change to general form? Okay, number 1 here, the first one. What would be your algebra first move? How do you start maneuvering this equation? What would be a good first step? So what does general form look like again? So this is my goal. What's a first step to get there? We're going to have candy offered. Mine's rolling. Okay, we can think of the first algebraic step for candy then. I don't think I'm going to do that as my first step. I can see where you're going with that. I will kind of do that idea later. Moving the y to the other side. I want to kind of be doing that somewhere. Multiply everything by 2 because I don't want fractions in there. Okay, so multiply by 2 and it's a candy, so do it to everything, right? So multiply by 2, so this was 2y. Do you know what happens when you multiply that fraction by 2? There's just no 2 in the bottom anymore, right? It's gone. Okay, so now I'm going to do the stuff that a few of the answers here were, and we're going to be moving stuff to the other side. So I'm going to go this way because I like to keep x positive. So if this would move over here, it'd be x. This would have to stay minus 16. And now you have a nothing on that side because you took everything out of it. Okay, so that was kind of hard to see that first step. Get rid of the fraction. Okay, versus this. What is the first step on this one? It's a little bit easier to see. Distribute. Okay, and then same kind of idea here where we move it. So 3x is going to stay put. I would be doing a minus 7y. And then we're going to have to be careful here. This will do a move. So when I do move it, it would add 28. But then I have this as well. Does that make sense in algebra? Moving this over, so you would add 28. Okay, so make sure, some of you I think need to maybe practice that a little more. Make sure you're understanding that. Okay, writing equations if I give you graphs. So on this one, it looks like I can clearly identify a y-intercept, so that's important to me. And I'm going to find another coordinate. So just any other coordinate. Looks like this is the next one I would see. So my y-intercept is 2, and my movement is down to right 1. So my slope is -2 then. Down to right 1. So I'm going to write it in mx plus b. So y equals mx plus b. If you had this as your answer, you were also correct. Okay, I'm not going to deduct you points for that. That's also good. Okay, can you try this exact same format on this question? Exact same format. Can you try that on your own? So I was getting a slope of 2 and a y-intercept of 1. Okay, so the third one should have a red flag written on it. It is special. So is it going to always have the same x or the same y? Which one is always the same? The y, and it's located at -4. Okay, so special lines, you just have to have those in your head. Okay, write an equation for this line. So I would like you to figure out, first of all, what am I doing? How much am I moving as a slope? Okay, so I got a up 4 and a right 2. So I am going to be picking this method. Would you have identified that as you're choosing? Because I don't have a y-intercept. I have a point. Okay, and you can put a 4 there, and you can put a 2 there if you want. And now you can pick which point you want to use, and it doesn't matter. So you could have had that, your partner could have had that, you're both correct. Also, you could have done this. 4/2 is really just a 2. So somebody also could have written like that, using a 2 and a 1 as a multiplier. Okay, so multiple answers there, all good. Okay, the next one. There's a line that has a slope of 5/8, but you need to be perpendicular to that. So if you want to be perpendicular, what is your slope? What's the rule? Opposite, flip. So if this is positive, this has to be negative. And it gives me a y-intercept. So now I can write. Okay, the next one, you are perpendicular. So what is your slope if you are perpendicular to that original one? Negative, and then flipped is just 4. And I have a point. So then I always have to think, well, which form am I going to use? I'm going to use this format. So the bracket one, point slope. Okay, I'm going to write a -4 in the front of this bracket. You don't have to write this one because it would be a 1, so you don't have to write it at all. Plugging in the point with opposite stuff. Okay, this time we have a line and we want to be parallel to that line. So what is the slope of our line if we are parallel? We're just the exact same. Whatever you see, you have to be the same. And a y-intercept. So if I'm given a y-intercept, I'm going to pick the mx plus b one. Okay, the last one on here, it's not going to be the last one because I'm going to make you do one more question I'm going to add on. Write an equation that is perpendicular to the one that's drawn, and ours has to go through that point. Okay, so what is the slope of this line? That's the first question you should ask yourself. So counting here, 1, 2, 3, 4 down. And 5 right. So what you got is your count. So what is our slope going to need to be of the new line? You're going to need to have a positive slope and then flip that. And my line also has to go through this point. So now I know the slope of my line and a point on my line. So I'm picking the format of that. That is my format I'm going to follow. Point slope form. So I'm going to put the 5 and the 4 in the fronts. Opposite numbers. Okay, then you have to graph this line. So -1, -2 is a coordinate on your graph. And you're going to have to go from that point up 5, right 4. And when you look at your drawing, does it look perpendicular? Would you say that that's a 90-degree intersection? Yeah, I would say it looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to give you one more question here because I feel like this is a harder one on the test. So here's my question. It's gonna, your line is gonna go through the coordinate 4, 1, and your line is gonna have a y-intercept of -2. You gotta make an equation for me.
Will we have a graph on the test to use for this question?
Nope. But you can always just make one. Okay. What am I going to do? Goes through that point and has a y-intercept of that. I feel like when I read it, I'm just missing something very important. What's the biggest piece of information we always need no matter what we're doing? Slope. I got nothing that tells me about slope. Do we have a method of finding slope? This is a point, and this is a y-intercept, but isn't that technically a point? Yeah. How do you know what point it is? What would you call that point? 0, -2. Right? A y-intercept is actually a coordinate with a 0, -2. Now, how's my method of finding my slope going to happen? y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Remember that formula? So this would be the first x, the first y. This would be the second x, the second y. Okay, so now you have your slope. Now you're good. You can figure out the rest by using a method of your choice. And you can actually pick either one. You can go with the slope and this y-intercept and then use mx plus b. That is one option. Or you can partner the slope with the point and use the bracket method. Slope and point. And then both of those answers get full points, whatever one you picked to do. But would you have noticed that you were missing slope? Okay, that's the biggest thing. You always have to have slope. No matter what you're doing, you have to have slope. This one tricks people because they forget the y-intercept is a coordinate, and that can help you get your slope. And then I noticed, do we get a graph? Well, yeah, you don't get a graph, but you can plot things and sketch things on your own if you need to kind of map them out and draw them out and figure them out as well, right? Does that make sense? If I'm a visual learner, I would have plotted that, and I just would have said, well, yeah, okay, I can just figure out my slope. Okay, you can do that as well. The formula does the same thing, or just your visual does the same thing as well.